Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham. Attacks against Islamic State fighters in Syria and Iraq continue today as President Obama admitted his administration underestimated ISIS. Dale Hurd has the story.
U.S.-led coalition forces have carried out more airstrikes on Islamic State positions in northern and eastern Syria today. The campaign is also intensifying on the ground, with Kurdish and Iraqi forces fighting ISIS militants who threaten the stability of the entire region. CBS 60 Minutes asked President Obama why his administration was caught off guard.
Our head of the intelligence community, Jim Clapper, has acknowledged that I think they underestimated what had been taking place in Syria.
I mean, he didn't just say that we underestimated ISIL. He said we overestimated the ability and the will of our allies, the Iraqi army, to fight.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
The president described ISIS as a cancer, but House Speaker John Boehner says the president's strategy for defeating the malignant force won't work.
If the goal is to destroy ISIS, as the president says it is, I don't believe the strategy that he outlined will accomplish that. At the end of the day, I think it's going to take more than airstrikes to drive them out of there. At some point, somebody's boots have to be on the ground. That's the whole point.
Meanwhile, National Review magazine is accusing the administration of making up a terrorist entity it calls the Khorasan Group. The magazine reports the Khorasan Group is simply Al-Qaeda, but the president doesn't want to say we're still fighting them. One part of the administration's strategy is to back the Free Syrian Army, and it's a risk.
Well, the Free Syrian Army, clearly we're putting our money on them to be able to deal with ISIS. Certainly it is a short-term gain for the Assad regime, the fact that we are using the Free Syrian Army and we're attacking ISIS.
Speaker Boehner warns the president's strategy better work.
We have no choice. These are barbarians. They intend to kill us. And if we don't destroy them first, we're going to pay the price.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Canon Andrew White, the Anglican priest known as the Vicar of Baghdad, says he predicted the withdrawal of American troops from Iraq would bring disaster. The pastor of St. George's Church in downtown Baghdad recently spoke with USA Today columnist Kristen Powers. He told her, "I sat down with all my staff when the U.S. was withdrawing, and I said, give it 3 years and we will be in hell, and we are." White, who supported the invasion in 2003, says the country is literally 5,000 times worse than before. We used to have one Saddam. Now we have thousands. He says he used to tell his congregation not to leave, but he can't anymore because if they stay, they might not be alive much longer. Terrorist violence threatened the Afghanistan presidential inauguration today as the new Afghan president was sworn into office. 2 bomb attacks killed at least 12 civilians and police officers. The new president, Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai, called out the terrorists, asking them to lay down their weapons. He also said he'll sign a status of forces agreement with the U.S. Police are filing formal murder charges today in the beheading of a woman at a food distribution center in an Oklahoma City suburb. Investigators say Alton Nolan attacked 2 women and beheaded one of them Thursday, shortly after he was fired from Vaughn Foods in Moore. Right now, the FBI is calling the incident an isolated case of workplace violence, despite concerns of Nolan's pride for Muslim extremism. One of his Facebook posts shows a beheading and reads a quote from the Quran saying, "I will instill terror into the hearts of unbelievers. Smite ye above their necks and smite all their fingertips off of them."
After conducting interviews with co-workers of Nolan, information was obtained that he recently started trying to convert some of his co-workers to the Muslim religion.
Nolan faces charges of first-degree murder and assault and battery. Texas Senator Ted Cruz won the presidential poll at this weekend's Values Voters Summit. As David Brody reports, the annual event gives social conservatives a chance to rally the troops Election Day.
It's a familiar script here to a welcoming crowd. Talk of traditional marriage, pro-life, and religious liberty received loud applause with the midterm elections right around the corner.
If you want to defend the First Amendment, our free speech, our religious liberty, vote Harry Reid out.
Senators Ted Cruz and Rand Paul came here hoping to impress a crowd that they're going to need if they run for the White House. But more moderate politicians like Jeb Bush and Chris Christie were noticeably absent. Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council tells CBN News that was intentional.
They were not invited this year because they just weren't on the top of the list in terms of what they're doing right now and whether or not it was relevant to the value of voters and who they'd want to hear from. They shouldn't take it the wrong way.
One guy definitely on the list was Rick Santorum, runner-up to Mitt Romney in the 2012 GOP presidential primaries. He tells CBN News that a presidential run is weighing on him heavily.
I'm very serious about looking at it, traveling, getting a lot of encouragement.
And he has a clear message for other would-be candidates.
We have to stop nominating Republican candidates who don't believe what the Republican Party says they believe in.
There's always a lot of fiery rhetoric from the stage, and there's a lot of passion in the exhibit halls behind me every year, actually, at these conferences. But how do you translate the fiery rhetoric and the passion into more Christian voters showing up at the polls? Libertarian Rand Paul thinks he has the answer, and people are taking notice. He's reaching out to a younger, more diverse crowd. His non-traditional views on foreign policy and focus on minority-filled urban areas led a high-level Obama administration official to actually call him the most interesting Republican in 2016.
I think it is a compliment, but I think also that Republicans need to realize that if we are going to win national elections again, the same old that has been losing will not win again. And I'm spending a lot of time going to areas of big cities where people live in poverty and there's high unemployment and there's sort of this despair. And I'm saying, you know what? Give Republicans another chance.
They will get that chance in November. The question remains, will voters turn out in an election where the White House isn't up for grabs? David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Miriam Ibrahim, the Christian mother who was once jailed and sentenced to death in Sudan for her faith, was honored at the Values Voters Summit. Speaking in broken English, Ibrahim told the crowd, God is good all the time. Miriam also spoke personally to Naghmeh Abedini, the wife of Pastor Saeed Abedini, who is imprisoned in Iran. Miriam told Naghmeh, do not fear, remain strong, take care of your kids, and the Lord will be with you. Pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong continue defying government orders to disperse and go home. The student-led protests began last week with sit-ins around the city's financial district. They're protesting Beijing's rejection of open nominations for candidates in the first-ever elections for Hong Kong's leader. Instead, candidates must continue to be handpicked by a committee of mostly local tycoons and screened on the basis of their patriotism to China. Local police used tear gas and pepper spray against protesters Sunday night. At least 26 people were taken to hospitals. Political unrest and war around the globe are driving people from their home countries. Surprisingly, many are finding refuge in what much of the world might see as a dangerous place, Israel. The number of immigrants entering the country is at a 5-year high. As Chris Mitchell reports, many of those Jews are escaping the world's current hotspots.
When 19-year-old Alexandrina Zolodev saw her family safely on the ground in Israel, she couldn't stop crying.
When I saw them, I cried a lot. My mom cried too. It's really a happy day, but we're crying a lot.
Alexandrina immigrated here last year when Ukraine was still relatively quiet. Then the fighting began, catching her family in the middle of it.
When I lost contact with them, I was very worried because I didn't know what happened there. They called later and my dad told me that every day they were sleeping in the cellar. It's like a shelter in the house. They ate there. There was no water, no electricity. There was nothing in the house.
Her family joined the last group of immigrants arriving at Ben Gurion Airport before the Jewish New Year. Nearly 25,000 Jewish people immigrated to Israel since the Rosh Hashanah holiday last year. Many of them came from war zones or places where anti-Semitism is on the rise.
For the first time, the biggest number of Jews who come to Israel is from France. We have a big increase from Russia and Ukraine.
Jewish Agency Chairman Natan Sharansky immigrated to Israel after spending years in a Soviet prison.
For me, it's especially exciting to see these families from Ukraine who are coming from the places where I grew. These places are destroyed now by the war. Ukrainians and Russians are shooting, firing from all types of weapons. and Jews are caught in the middle.
He said Christians play a big role in helping Jewish immigrants connect with his agency. When they do come, many arrive with little more than the clothes on their backs.
They come here without anything, without maybe 2 suitcases, that's all, because of bombing, and Israel is the country that can help them.
Sharansky says these immigrants are fulfilling Jewish prayers and Bible prophecy, in which God promises to bring his people back to the land.
Every of these Jews is closing the circle of thousands of years, at least 50 generations of his fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers. We're praying next year in Jerusalem. And here they are this day in Jerusalem.
The Zolodev family will settle in the Israeli community of Ra'anana, and Alexandrina will soon join the IDF. Alexandrina's dad arrived on his 41st birthday and says he has hope for the future, that his dreams will be fulfilled. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv.
Evangelist Billy Graham turns 96 years old this November. His son Franklin says his father remains lucid but far weaker than last year, adding that he is in stable condition but only has strength enough for short conversations and spends much of his time in prayer. Coming up, the fight against churches meeting in New York public schools. One pastor says it will go all the way to the nation's highest court. The issue of churches meeting in public school buildings for Sunday services may be headed to the U.S. Supreme Court. 16 years ago, the Bronx Household of Faith sued the city over a policy preventing churches from holding worship services in public schools. Attorneys with the Alliance Defending Freedom have asked the Supreme Court to uphold the freedom of churches and other congregations to rent schools for services. Recently, my co-anchor Charlene Aaron spoke with Pastor Dimas Salaberios about the fight and the right to hold services in city schools.
What's been happening with churches holding services in public schools in New York?
Well, right now, churches have been allowed to continue holding services, and there's been no problem. School has just started, and one of the big questions were, will kids think that because a service is going on inside of a school that the kids will mistake it for a church? And we've never heard anything like that. So churches are doing fine and being excellent neighbors to the Department of Education right now.
Well, what are your thoughts on the whole idea that churches have to fight for the right to hold services in schools while other groups don't really have that problem?
I think it's pretty ridiculous because the church right now serves the city the best. When I think of Superstorm Sandy, which came through New York City, the church was the main volunteer force all throughout all the devastated areas and worked hand in hand. Even the federal government, FEMA, met inside of churches. And it's so odd that the church is the base of support for the whole nation in any crisis, but yet to use it for 2 hours or 3 hours on a Sunday morning has become such a large issue in New York City.
What's behind this whole push to keep churches out of the public schools?
One of the things that we notice in New York City, there's a strong liberal, aggressive movement to attack churches because churches hold up to morality, hold up to standards, and different groups have decided to really focus in on fighting against the church. One of those groups, unfortunately, which showed up in large number to our surprise, was the LGBT community, thinking that, the best way to establish their plans would be to crush the church in the city. But when 16,000 people marched across the Brooklyn Bridge and Mayor Bloomberg saw that this was a growing movement, they quickly silenced that argument and tried to go a different direction.
Excellent way to put it. Pastor Dimas Salaberios, thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you very much. God bless you all.
You too.
Up next, 5 years after an earthquake killed 250,000 people, a nation emerges stronger than ever. Hear how Haiti is rebuilding itself next. Rescue workers suspended their search near the summit of a Japanese volcano that erupted Saturday. So far, they've discovered 36 bodies, but believe there could be more. Toxic gas and ash continue to erupt from Mount Atake, forcing workers to abandon rescue efforts. The gases, suffocating ash and falling rocks killed the hikers. Police say the latest victims were found near the shrine at the summit, and the ash in some places was almost 2 feet high. They say 40 others were injured. Well, it has been nearly 5 years since Haiti was devastated by a crushing 7.0 magnitude earthquake. 250,000 people were killed. More than 1 million others were left homeless. The recovery has been slow. But as I discovered on my recent visit to the country, some survivors are finding hope once again. These days, spontaneous singing spills out from the church to the streets of Haiti.
The recovery from the earthquake has been slow, but it has happened. 5 years ago, Haiti was literally a disaster zone. There was rubble in the streets, and most of the economy, business, and government was shut down.
Matthew Moore arrived here in 2010, soon after the massive earthquake hit. It killed more than 200,000 people in about 30 seconds. This mass grave with thousands of unidentified remains is possibly the most painful reminder of the quake's horrors. The statistics here in Haiti are a series of lows: lowest life expectancy, lowest income, and lowest literacy rates in all of the Western Hemisphere. Despite the stats, there are growing signs of recovery, like paved, clean streets.
Haiti now is much better off than it was then. There are still many, many problems. I see progress. It depends on who you talk to, on whether that progress is good progress or bad progress.
Progress includes new construction projects, homegrown businesses, and the daily sound of children playing without fear.
Once we raise up a generation of godly men and women, that will bring change to Haiti. That will bring hope to Haiti. It's already begun.
While many disaster relief agencies have long packed up and left Port-au-Prince, a commitment to Haiti's future has kept organizations like CBN's Operation Blessing in town to run an orphanage. Regent University teams train Haitian pastors to be counselors. And Compassion International helps send children like Pierre Elise to school.
These people are particularly vulnerable. And so after the earthquake, they're not going to be the first ones helped. They're probably going to be the last ones helped.
Alléluia, moi je veux Jésus, que longtemps n'a moi cherché.
It's taken years for Pierre to find his voice after the earthquake.
I remember it happened around 4:40. School was over at 2:30. I met Mom on the streets at 2:45. I never saw her again.
Pierre's mother died in the disaster, leaving her 3 children behind.
The next morning, we woke up and went looking for her. In that moment, we realized how big the impact of the earthquake was. We went out and saw people on the ground. It was weird seeing that many dead bodies. So I said to myself, oh God, maybe Mom is dead too.
A severe case of post-traumatic stress left the 17-year-old angry and bitter. But he refused to share his feelings with his father or anyone else.
I didn't want to do anything except to wait for death to come and take me. So I became so scared. Scared to go to school, scared to go to church, scared to go out.
Pierre bottled his pain for more than 2 years until he attended a camp for young earthquake survivors and met with a child psychologist.
I was facing the shore, under the shade of a coconut tree, and she started talking to me. I started to weep, and I wept for the rest of my time at the camp. I think that even when I was sleeping, I was weeping.
Tears, prayer, and scripture ended his nightmare and taught him that there is
nobody greater than Jesus. God is able.
He now dreams of bringing that message to other suffering children in his country
as an evangelist and an engineer.
Compassion International helped him to find his strength. They're also helping more than a dozen business owners to launch businesses in the community that are right now thriving. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And finally today, colorful parades and festivities throughout Mexico and Central America mark the region's Independence Day celebrations this September. At the same time, Hispanic Christians found another reason to celebrate. Myra Alejandra explains.
Spanish-speaking Christians received their first printed Bible over 4 centuries ago, in September of 1569. It became known as the Bible of the Bear, because the cover showed a bear eating from a honeycomb. Today, Bibles are found in 88% of all Hispanic households. Yet, according to a recent Barna study, very few Hispanics read the Bible on a regular basis. Only 8%. Compared to 21% of the general population. Church leaders around the Americas see a growing problem of Bible illiteracy. In Costa Rica, one congressman decided to promote Bible reading by donating a Bible to each of his fellow legislators.
I believe that it was worth commemorating this way, giving each congressman a Bible and telling him, this is the book we need as a manual for life.
For the past 14 years, Costa Rica has celebrated the Day of the Bible each September, officially for the purpose of strengthening the country's moral and spiritual values.
We believe that the Word of God is a blessing for Costa Rica, and the closer it becomes to those of us who govern the country, the better off our country will be.
By drawing attention to the Bible this month, Bible societies and church leaders hope to reverse the decline in Bible readership. Myra Alejandra, CBN News.
And that's it for CBN News today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Certainly hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a marvelous Monday, everybody.